See how far we get this morning in the remaining 22-page purport from Sri Brhad Bhagavatamrta, Part 2, Chapter 7, text number 14. The text reads, "Such are the most amazing glories of contact with a great saint. By that contact, this Brahmana suddenly achieved perfection, realizing his eternal identity." So continuing on page 564, as Sri Kapila Dev tells his mother, Satam prasangan mamavirya sambidho bhavanti ritkarna rasayana kata. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating knowledge of the Lord's activities, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter one is freed, and one's attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. Paragraph. Here, Lord Kapila Dev mentions 3 symptoms of the gradual development of prema: firm conviction, shraddha; love for the Lord, rati; and unswerving dedication to his service, bhakti. In the course of devotional advancement, each of these symptoms becomes manifest naturally without separate endeavor. Lord Kapila does not intend to say that the sequence of development is literally Shraddha, then Rati, then Bhakti. Rather, we should understand that first, a new devotee acquires faith, Shraddha, then takes up the process of Bhakti by hearing, chanting, and serving, and later achieves Rati. Because Bhakti means both the practice of devotional service and the mature stage of spontaneous love, to say that Rati, parentheses prema, is the fruit of Bhakti is correct. Paragraph. With the same concept of Bhakti in mind, Sri Dhruva prays to Lord Vishnu, Bhaktim maho prabha hatam trayi me prasango bhoyad ananta mahatam amala shayanam. O unlimited Lord. This is Bhagavatam 4, 9, 11. O unlimited Lord, kindly bless me so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly. As the waves of a river constantly flow, such transcendental devotees are completely situated in an uncontaminated state of life by the process of devotional service. Surely I will be able to cross the nescient ocean of material existence, which is filled with the waves of blazing fire-like dangers. It will be very easy for me, for I am becoming mad to hear about your transcendental qualities and pastimes which are eternally existent. Paragraph. Because the devotees of Vishnu serve him constantly, Bhaktim muhu prabhahatam, that's the first line of Dhruva's statement, because the devotees of Vishnu serve him constantly, their hearts are completely pure. Amala Shayanam. And for that reason, they are exalted souls, Mahatam. The association of such Vaishnavas is extremely desirable. One who achieves it need not bother aspiring for the fourth goal of life, liberation, for liberation comes automatically as a byproduct of pure devotion. Dhruva anticipates that in the company of Vaishnavas he will drink the nectar of topics about the Supreme Lord, which will intoxicate him and empower him to cross effortlessly the dangerous ocean of samsara. Drunkards are mainly interested in the taste of their liquor, semicolon. They have only a superficial interest in the secondary effects of alcohol, such as the ability to ease the discomfort of cold weather. In the same way, devotees who have taste for drinking the nectar of Bhagavat Bhakti consider relishing the elixir forever their principal goal. They accept liberation and other secondary benefits only when such boons do not obstruct that eternal delight. Paragraph. So that was 4.9.11. Here's 4.24, 57, 58. Lord Shiva gives this opinion. Translation: if one by chance associates with a devotee even for a fraction of a moment, one is no longer subject to attraction by the results of karma or jnana. What interest then can he have in benedictions of the demigods who are subject to the laws of birth and death? My dear Lord, your lotus feet are the cause of all auspicious things and the destroyer of all contamination of sin. I therefore beg your lordships to bless me with the association of your devotees, who are completely purified by worshipping your lotus feet, and who are so merciful upon the conditioned souls. I think that your real benediction will be to allow me to associate with such devotees. Paragraph. Rather than liberation, what to speak of royal power and the other kinds of success that ordinary people value, Lord Shiva would prefer even a moment's association with those who keep company with the personality of Godhead. In other words, the company of the Supreme Lord's devotees dances on the heads of all other goals of life. The lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, who killed the demon named Agha, remove all sins, all sin. The Lord's fame is the source of all holy tirthas, including the river Ganga and also the river Yamuna, whose bathing ghats the gopis approached to fetch water. Lord Shiva takes 2 purifying baths, one externally in the Ganga and the other internally in the Yamuna. Interesting. Similarly, a bath in the Supreme Lord's fame purifies his devotees in 2 ways. Externally, by absolving them from hellish punishment, and internally, by cleansing their hearts of desires for material enjoyment. Persons dedicated to the fame of the Supreme Lord and to his lotus feet are merciful to all creatures. Such devotees always live purely, devoid of lust and other contaminations of heart, and they have simplicity and other exemplary qualities. Lord Shiva prays that Lord Vishnu's greatest mercy on him would be simply to let him come in touch with the Supreme Lord's devotees. Paragraph. 5th Canto, Chapter 12, verses 12-13. Sri Jada Bharata speaks likewise. Quote, "My dear King Rahugana, unless one has the opportunity to smear his entire body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, one cannot realize the absolute truth. Vina Mahatpada Rajo Abhishekam. One cannot realize the absolute truth simply by observing celibacy, by strictly following the rules and regulations of householder life, by leaving home as a vanaprastha, by accepting sannyas, or by undergoing severe penance in winter, by keeping oneself submerged in water, or in summer, by surrounding oneself by fire and the scorching heat of the sun. There are many other processes to understand the absolute truth, but the absolute truth is revealed only to one who has attained the mercy of a great devotee." And that was one of the two verses spoken by Jad Bharat. Here's the second of the two verses. Quote, "Who are the pure devotees mentioned here? In an assembly of pure devotees, there is no question of discussing material subjects like politics and sociology. In an assembly of pure devotees, there is discussion only of the qualities, forms, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised and worshipped with full attention. In the association of pure devotees, by constantly hearing such topics respectfully, even a person who wants to merge into the existence of the absolute truth abandons this idea and gradually becomes attached to the service of Vasudeva." Paragraph. In the verse just before the two quoted here, Jad Bharata identified the absolute truth as Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, and as Vasudeva, the darling son of Vasudeva. Now he tells King Rahugana that this Supreme Person is impossible to achieve along with those methods. One bathes in the dust from the feet of pure Vaishnavas. There must be an unless. Yeah, unless. Along with those other methods. Yeah, unless. Along with those methods, one bathes in dust from the feet of pure Vaishnavas. It is not enough to follow the prescribed duties of one's varna and ashram, concentrate one's mind in one pointed tapas, execute Vedic sacrifices, distribute food and other charity, work piously as a householder, study the Vedas, or worship water, fire, and other elements of nature, and the presiding deities Varuna, Agni, and so on. These efforts may help one achieve the favor of Lord Vasudeva only when the sadhaka has pleased the Lord's devotees. And by satisfying the devotees, one can win the mercy of the Supreme Lord even if one has not performed any of these purifying acts. Paragraph. Lord Krishna is known as Uttama Shloka, he whose spotless fame drives away all ignorance. When one has bathed in the dust of the feet of his devotees, one can enter the company of those devotees and hear from them about Krishna's transcendental qualities, beginning with his incessant kindness towards his devotees. Hearing day after day this pure Krishna Katha raises a materialist to the level of an aspirant for liberation, and such an aspirant to the level of sincere interest in devotional service to Krishna. In the same narration, Rahugana replies to Jad Bharat. This is the following chapter. That was 512. This is 513. Rahugana says, "This birth as a human being on earth is the best of all. Even birth among the demigods in the heavenly planets is not as glorious. What is the use of the exalted position of a demigod in the heavenly planets? Due to profuse material comforts, there is no possibility of associating with devotees." Paragraph. Human life is the most congenial situation for becoming attracted to Bhagavat Bhakti. Demigod life may be desirable to foolish people, but great saints like Jad Bharat rarely even visit the heavenly planets. The demigods, being too much absorbed in sense gratification, generally do not deserve the company of such pure Vaishnavas. Rather than travel to heaven, saintly Vaishnavas, who keep their hearts cleansed by contemplating the glories of Lord Rishikesh, usually prefer to wander among the holy places on earth. Paragraph. Now we're moving on to Canto 7, Text 5. In the opinion of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, quote, "Unless persons very much inclined toward materialistic life smear their bodies upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, completely freed from material contamination, such persons cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, in this way can one be freed from material contamination." Paragraph. Just before Prahlad made this statement, he expressed concern for the ignorant materialists of this world who cannot recognize that the best goal for their own self-interest is Lord Vishnu. Such gross materialists must bathe in the foot dust of pure Vaishnavas who reject all forms of selfish enjoyment and care about nothing but Bhagavad Bhakti, for otherwise the mind of such gross materialists can never shift toward devotional service to the Lord. Without the mercy of great devotees, foolish materialists cannot ascertain spiritual truth, even theoretically, what to speak of reap its tangible fruits. Moving on to Canto 10. In the words of King Muchukunda, quote, "When the material life of a wandering soul has come to an end, O Achyuta, he may attain the association of your devotees." That's a technical point. It's one of these passages in the Bhagavatam where the effect is said to be the cause and the cause is said to be effect. And it's a literary ornament that indicates the person who is speaking, in this case Muchukunda, he's so ecstatic, he speaks it backwards. Because bhakti is the cause of the effect. That is, the wandering soul having his material life come to an end. This is the effect. And when he associates with them, there awakens within him devotion unto you, who are the goal of the devotees and the Lord of all causes and effects. Paragraph. Conditioned souls wander aimlessly in the cycle of birth and death, and only after they have become fed up with this wandering are they allowed to come in touch with the pure Vaishnavas. Well, not always. Then, by the company of saintly Vaishnavas, a few of those fortunate souls are not only released from the cycle of birth and death, samsara, but also given something much more precious, pure love for the Supreme Controller of all causes and effects. And if they are not fortunate enough to achieve the intimate love for the Supreme Lord, at least they learn how to reverentially serve Him, the ruler of all great demigods and ordinary creatures. Paragraph. Now we're moving on to Canto 11, Chapter 26. This is Uddhava Gita. Quote, just as cold, fear, and darkness are eradicated from one who has approached the sacrificial fire, so dullness, fear, and ignorance are destroyed by one engaged in serving the devotees of the Lord. And then another verse, there's four of them. The devotees of the Lord, peacefully fixed in absolute knowledge, are the ultimate shelter for those who are repeatedly rising and falling within the fearful ocean of material life. The devotees are just like a strong boat that comes to rescue persons at the point of drowning. The next verse, translation. Just as food is the life of all creatures, just as I am the ultimate shelter for the distressed, and just as religion is the wealth of those who are passing through and passing away from this material world, my devotees are the only refuge of persons fearful of falling into a miserable condition of life. And then the final verse that's being translated from Uddhava Gita. My devotees bestow divine eyes, whereas the sun allows only external sight, and that only when risen in the sky. My devotees are one's real, worshipable deities and real family. They are one's own self. They are one's own self, and ultimately they are non-different from me. Paragraph. Just as by approaching fire one can get relief from darkness and fear of snakes and wild animals, by approaching pure Vaishnavas one can be freed from the darkness of materialistic life, from fear of what will happen in the future, and from forgetfulness of blissful service to the Lord, a forgetfulness that underlies all material ignorance and fear. Paragraph. The prefix upa in the verse beginning yata, yatopa, so that's yata upa, shrayamanasya, indicates the idea of approaching from a distance. This implies that one can gain the blessings of Vaishnavas by serving them even in separation. Yata upa shrayamanasya. Yata upa shrayamanasya. Saintly Vaishnavas who understand the absolute truth as he appears in Brajadam can deliver persons entrapped in the cycle of higher and lower births. The Vaishnavas are qualified to give such a priceless gift because they have realized the glories of Krishna's devotional service, which is the confidential essence of the Vedic teachings. Such devotees, peaceful and unagitated even by the prospect of being liberated, bestow upon fortunate souls various types of spiritual vision, realization of the impersonal and personal features of the Absolute Truth, and discernment of the many different modes of Bhagavat Bhakti. The external sun, in contrast, gives light, but only in a limited way. Paragraph. Rather than attempt to enumerate all the glories of Vaishnavas, an impossible task, we should know that a single saintly devotee equals all the demigods combined. Pure devotees are our real friends and our own dear soul, the source of our life. In fact, in Krishna's opinion, the Vaishnavas are not different from himself. I'll read a little bit more and then we'll go back and just to summarize. Earlier in the Bhagavatam 11.11.49, Krishna said to Uddhava, "Now I will tell you something especially confidential because you are my servant, well-wisher, and companion." Krishna then says, quote, "My dear Uddhava, by associating with my pure devotees, one can destroy one's attachment for all object of material sense gratification. Such purifying association brings me under one's control. One may perform the Ashtanga Yoga system, engage in philosophical analysis of the elements of material nature, practice nonviolence and other ordinary principles of piety, or chant the Vedas. One may perform penances, take to the renounced order of life, execute sacrificial performances and dig wells, plant trees, and perform other public welfare activities. One may give charity, carry out severe vows, worship the demigods, chant confidential mantras, visit holy places, or accept major and minor disciplinary injunctions. But even by performing such activities, one does not bring me under one's control." Bhagavatam 11, Canto, Chapter 12. The first and second steps of Patanjali Rishi's Ashtanga Yoga method are the 12 niyamas, or minor regulations, and 12 yamas, major regulations. Sri Krishna lists these for Uddhava. 11th Canto, Chapter 19. It's a long list. Nonviolence, truthfulness, unwillingness to covet or steal the property of others, detachment, humility, freedom from possessiveness, trust in the principles of religion, celibacy, silence, steadiness, forgiveness, and fearlessness are the 12 primary disciplinary principles. Internal cleanliness, external cleanliness, chanting the holy names of the Lord, austerity, sacrifice, faith, hospitality, worship of me, visiting holy places, acting for and desiring only the supreme interest, satisfaction, and service to the spiritual master, 12 elements of regular prescribed duties. These 24 elements bestow all desired benedictions upon those persons who devotedly cultivate them. Paragraph. The company of exalted Vaishnavas counteracts not only material attachment, but also attachment to the Supreme Lord's pastimes in Vaikuntha and abodes other than Goloka. What to speak of the power of direct contact with Vaishnavas? Even hearing descriptions of their greatness leads to the highest success, as Sri Vidura states in the 3rd canto. Quote, "Persons who hear from a spiritual master with great labor and for a long time must hear from his mouth about the character and activities of pure devotees, who always think within their hearts of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the personality of Godhead, he who awards them liberation. Shoo-wee. Page 586, we're at 574. It's after 8 o'clock. I mean, it's nice hearing all these things, but let's step back and contemplate what's being said. Kind of stepping back a little bit beyond just this particular section. Sanatana Goswami is writing a book that's explaining Srimad Bhagavatam. And Maharaj Parikshit is narrating this to Uttara to explain Srimad Bhagavatam. And the situation is, here's this Mathura Brahmana who doesn't even know what the absolute truth is, the goal is, but he's eager, and he has a particular orientation. Kamaksha Devi, a Devi, a demigoddess, a Shakti worshipper, and somehow Radharani, through the medium of Kamaksha Devi, gives him Gopal mantra, and he comes back to Vrindavan. He's searching. So that's his situation. Others have something, for at least some faith in something that's religious or Vedic or something, but not having a clear idea. And Srimati Radharani sent Gopakumar or Sarup to go give mercy to this person who's in Braja and wanting to know what he doesn't know. And so what's going on here is the last chapter. Yes? Yeah, the last chapter. How did the Mathura Brahmana get to the point where he understood who he really was and his spiritual identity and the goal and everything? It came about from sadhu sangha. So this particular purport is breaking down very meticulously scriptural reference that indicates what is the impact of sadhu sangha, the singular importance of sadhu sangha. Without which one cannot get there, one cannot reach the goal. One can become qualified in different ways, but one cannot reach the goal without that sadhu sangha. I mean, it connects with this topic that we've been discussing a little bit about Nityananda, because Nityananda, in one sense, he's guru, or from Nityananda all Guru Tattva is supported and is resting upon. So Nityananda means Guru, Guru means Nityananda. One can think that way. Or we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita Radharani, because Sarup is hearing from Radharani, so representative of Radharani. And of course, the Goswamis, not that they don't have the proper regard for Nityananda, but they certainly have utmost regard for Radharani, and they're just obedient to her. And she says, and Sarup does, because he got her mercy. And we're going to hear how the mature Brahman, you keep going, he gets Radharani's mercy too, by the mercy of Sarup. So that's this a very elevated description of the principle of the cyclic succession that we find in Bhagavad Gita and repeated over and over and over and over and over by Prabhupada in his writings and his lectures. But there's great power in sadhu sangha. There's power invested in the sadhu to do all these wonderful things. The two main things that are identified repeatedly: removal of unwanted, awakening of wanted. And then when one has that removal of unwanted, awakening of wanted, then there's the Bhagavad message, or the Lord Chaitanya's message of distributing that which one has received in a mood of detachment. And the mood of detachment means maybe the mature Brahmana will get it, maybe the mature Brahmana won't get it, but Sarup is making his effort. And now in this case, he gets it. There may be many, many people, there are many, many people that don't get it. But there's benefit for them anyways. That's Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. And that's the Bhagavatam's message. People should get the opportunity to hear. And ideally to hear from one who is completely attached to the personality of Godhead in his service, uninterruptedly. So most of us are not there yet, but we want the association. So we, even remotely, we hear from in this case, Sanatana Goswami, the commentary and the commentary and the commentary, and Gopi's rendering of his commentary. With faith. Attentively, with faith. And those two things, cleansing and awakening. The path to transcendence is opened with hearing with faith and hearing regularly. So that's the picture we're getting from so far in this 24-page purport. I guess we'll continue tomorrow morning. Yeah, and then we'll have to change channels for the weekend. The path is clear. The biblical saying is, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Let's see if there's some discussion. 10 after 8. Yeah.
I'll just, a few questions.
Keep going.
I guess there's that verse where it's saying austerities, it's not by austerities or charity or, but then don't we hear, tapo dibyam, there's some austerity that is required for bhakti.
Yes.
So how is that?
They're not standalone. That's to understand it. And there's divyam tapa. That divyam tapa is where the purpose of the tapa is to please Krishna. And when tapa is when control of the senses, etc., following of regulations, etc., giving in charity, etc., performing yoga, etc., is done for the pleasure of the personality of Godhead, that's divyam. It's a dovetail, it becomes devotional service. But it's devotional service, it's not the tapa in itself.
So we have to make sure our purpose is
Pleasing
correct.
Krishna. Yes.
Pleasing Krishna.
The consciousness behind. It's like the question that was asked last night about becoming attached to Lord Nityananda and His mercy and attached to. So there's the regulations that we follow, we're to follow. But that's not sufficient. Rising early, taking bath, You know, the behavior is purifying, but it's not sufficient. I mean, one way I like to say, we're not the International Society for Behavior Modification Incorporated. And we can modify behaviors, and it's going to help us awaken Krishna consciousness, but the essence of Krishna consciousness is not just the behaviors. One can be performing arti with one's mind's in the gutter. So it's alignment of, it's the internal cultivation of Krishna consciousness that is aroused by sadhusanga. So the stapodivyam, it's okay now?
Question from Shubhra Mataji. Guru Maharaj, what is our Bhagavat recommendation for the saying, spirit is willing but flesh is weak? What is one to do in that situation?
What one is to do in that situation is carry on with the faith that the spirit has, although the flesh or the material affinities are still lingering, or maybe even overpowering. One goes on with faith in the primary activities of bhakti. I forget the verse number, but it's Krishna's instructions to Uddhava, a very standard verse for the devotees should know. One who has faith in the topics of Krishna and at the same time has affinity for matter should regret their affinity for matter and recognizing their affinity for matter is going to cause suffering, but you go on anyways with the activities of purification with faith. Don't leave aside the faith because the flesh is weak. You nurture, give attention to your capacity. Now it's a conflict, or maybe even a contradiction. You pour water on a fire, it doesn't increase the fire, but you continue to stoke the fire anyways. By the primary activities of bhakti. Then the affinity for matter, the flesh is weak portion, can subside. Or one can say will subside if one does those things with faith. Next. That's it. Anything else? Yeah.
sadhu mean someone walking amongst us? Does it sometimes mean previous acharyas?
Yes, both. And sadhu, there's, just like Lord Chaitanya's answer to Satyaraj Khan, who's a Vaishnav. What's the duty of a householder? Chant Hare Krishna and serve the Vaishnavas. Who is a Vaishnav? So who's a sadhu? And there's stages of sadhu. You're familiar with that section, right? Lord Chaitanya said, the most liberal one, anyone who chants Krishna's name once, he's a Vaishnava. Then one who's initiated and follows the regulations of bhakti, he's a Vaishnava. And one who, just by seeing that person, you think of Krishna and call Krishna's name, he's a Vaishnava. So there's gradations of Vaishnava, there's gradations of sadhu. Sadhu simply means devotee. That's the simplest of definitions. Often Prabhupada would use that. Anyone who's a devotee is sadhu. And anyone who's not a devotee, not accepting the personality of Godhead and wanting to be connected with Him, that's asadhu. Sura and asura, a demon and a devotee. So there's gradations of sadhu. A teenager asked me 2 weeks ago, for somebody like me that's not very advanced in spiritual life, is it possible for me to be a conduit for bhakti for others? Because I'm not very advanced. Can I help awaken bhakti in others? The answer is yes, of course. Whatever the quantum of bhakti that one has, one can give it. And it has an impact. Then there's Prabhupada. And, we're somewhere in that spectrum. That's sadhu. Sadhu-like. The cultivation of. But when there's disconnect from sadhu sangha, for whatever the reason, internal or external, primarily internal, then bad qualities resume. So we want sadhu sangha. We want to become sadhu so we can give sadhu sangha at increasing stages or gradations. Clear? Okay, thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.